Hello, Out Entrepreneurs. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 35 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's show, we have Ryan Husk joining us all the way from the crosswinds of the West, Salt Lake City, Utah. So, Ryan, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Are you ready to inspire fellow out bosses?
Yes, I am. I'm excited.
Great. A little bit about Ryan. So Ryan has always been a nerd, so we share that in common. Knowing about the latest and greatest technology went from a hobby to a career when he started working at Apple. Leveraging what he learned in the corporate environment, Ryan launched oddjob.com, a platform that helps businesses ensure their employees feel valued through employee experience services. Ryan also owns a consulting firm where he helps clients like Rich Dad Education, Fresh Start, and InRoute improve all aspects of their tech infrastructure. So, Ryan, to kick off the interview, tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique.
Sure. Well, I'll start with Oddjob. And the thing that I love about Oddjob and the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because initially it just started off as a consumer product to help people get chores and errands done. And the reason why I came up with that was because I was trying to do my own startup and I didn't know what that was going to be like yet, but I didn't have the time. And that's how Oddjob was initially started. And we actually pivoted to businesses after a great experience for doing some work with a company. And I've been fortunate enough that for every company that I've worked with, I've felt very valued. The organizations and my leaders have almost always made sure that my needs were met and the needs of my teams were met. And I found that not everyone has been fortunate enough to have that experience. And we're at a time right now where technology companies care a lot about their employees, and they're not just giving them benefits that are long-term benefits like a 401k or great health insurance, which are very important, but they understand that people want to be cared about on sort of a regular reoccurring basis. I always describe that, when you're in a relationship, it's great to have plans like a vacation in a year or a new car, a new house down the road, but that doesn't mean you should stop bringing home flowers or cooking dinner or picking up ice cream if your partner's having a bad day. And so we are the picking up ice cream and cooking dinner for your employees so that they sort of feel invested in and cared about and valued, which, obviously generates great morale and builds culture and definitely builds loyalty.
I love that. The details absolutely matter. And in the work that I do a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I think people get really nervous, especially business owners around, how do I do this? It seems so abstract, culture, it's too big. We don't have time. And like what you were saying, those small things can often make a world of difference in making people just signaling like, hey, you're valued. And so you're doing oddjob.com. You're also doing a consulting work. So clearly, you're on the verge of the serial entrepreneurship bug. And so, you're doing a lot. And I'm curious right now, today, what has you most fired up about your businesses?
So by the time this podcast comes out, we will actually have closed our seed round with Oddjob. So that is a huge step. Oddjob was launched just in June 2016. So we have been moving pretty quickly. We pivoted in October towards businesses and things have been rolling really fast. And, as we've been working on closing this round, we've had a great agreement with our investors who have been helping us since January, before the contract is closed. But we're bringing in a lot of different companies. We are focused in Salt Lake City, but with just word of mouth, we've actually gotten businesses in Boise and Las Vegas and Phoenix. And so there's sort of this excitement around what we're building with Oddjob that is hard to, it's hard to keep up with because, it's still, a tiny startup, but these great companies want us to help them show their employees that they care about them. And that's amazing. And I feel really, it's kind of hard to believe that, a year ago, I wasn't sure if this was going to work. And actually the reason why I also have the consulting company is because, when I started Oddjob, there wasn't any revenue coming from that. So I just sort of took the skills that I learned at Apple and as I've been in tech and applied it to helping other companies. And so that was sort of how I got by and made sure that, I got food on the table and my dog got food in her bowl. I have a great fiance who's also made sure that none of us have starved. But we, it's exciting to just have something that other people understand is valuable, because I think it's something that's so incredibly important. And I think it's going to be really valuable, mostly valuable to the people who are on the receiving end of these services.
You said a couple of really valuable things there. The first is that you're talking about thinking about this concept of oddjob.com and not sure if or how it can succeed, right? And where you would get the resources to actually pay for it, and then would it bring in revenue? And so you leveraged a lot of your skills through your consulting business to fund that. And I think that that's really valuable for other aspiring entrepreneurs or those who are doing entrepreneurship right now and not quite at that point where their business is truly aligned with their bigger vision. So I think sharing that path is really valuable. And I want to thank you for doing that. The other, I would just have a follow-up question for you, because I know that we have some listeners that aren't quite deep in the waters of entrepreneurship yet. And so you had mentioned for OddJob that you had just finished up a seed round. Can you explain a little bit more of what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically and I actually probably can't speak to this because I'm a ton, but I'm not on the VC side. But, an angel round is sort of your first round of funding. That's, money that founders generally put in a little bit of money themselves, and then they raise money through family, friends, personal and professional relationships. And that's considered an angel round. And I think the numbers go up to somewhere around up to, $200,000 or $500,000. For us, our seed round, our angel round was small. It was about $50,000 through family and friends and professional relationships that I had. And so that sort of helped us build a little bit. But a seed round is for me personally, it's validation that I haven't been screwing it up for the last year. It's someone who doesn't know you, who looks at not just your idea, but they look at the progress you've made. They look at the users you have. They look at the revenue overall. They refer to it as traction. What sort of traction do you have that has gotten you from an idea, which is what angels invest in? They invest a lot in the idea, to what are the results of your efforts. And for us, it was, yes, there are companies who are interested in having a platform where they can get all of their business services and create a great experience in one place.
So I really like what you're saying about this concept of explaining the seed round. And there's actually, for our listeners, a few steps before that. And I think where a lot of people might be at this point is just doing the sweat equity. So you had this idea, you may even have a side hustle, and you're investing a lot in your business right now. And I think what's valuable in what Ryan has just shared is thinking about that angel round. So in addition to your own investments, thinking about family and friends and other professionals who can benefit from the business idea that you have, and going from that idea concept to then the confirmation through the seed round. So that's where you kind of get these venture capitalists potentially and other funders who don't know you to say, hey, you have a great idea. We're already seeing results. You're making progress. You have traction. You have this huge audience, or you're building an audience. We see the results and we can see where this is going. We want to take your vision to the next level. So I think you did a great job, Ryan, in just breaking that down, because a lot of people talk about angel investing and the seed investing, and there's even the Gangels that are out there right now who are LGBT funders, really looking at fellow LGBT entrepreneurs and saying, we want to build economic empowerment opportunities for our communities. And we're gonna look at those folks with great ideas and back it with resources. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to shift gears and talk a little bit more about your own identity. And specifically, I want to know if being LGBT influenced your journey to become your own boss, to start your own business.
Yeah, I mean, how could it not? I mean, I think that growing up, there's sort of, you kind of have these two experiences, and one is sort of naturally you want to pave your own way because you know that you're different and you don't want to be like other people, and you don't want to be put into a box where you have to conform to this idea of, for me, it was, playing sports. For other people, it was maybe the job type that they would want. But, I always pushed back against things that didn't necessarily feel intuitive to me. And, when I think of growing up, I mean, all my dad wanted me to do was like play some kind of sports ball. And I was just like, can I please go to computer class? And he's since learned to appreciate my nerdiness as much as I do. But I think there's also sort of a feeling of insecurity and not knowing if people are going to accept you or if you can be successful. And so, like, there's some combination of this desire for independence and making your own way, but also like this fear of, can I actually do this? And ultimately, I'm sort of, I founded Odd Job, when I was 30. So I'm a little bit late in the game for some. But I think I'm in the class with people like Jeff Bezos, who also founded their startups in their 30s. So it's there's good company there, but it probably slowed me down a little bit. But overall, the experience that I gained in working in the corporate world and working with Apple, it allowed me to sort of the same strength that I had to find being comfortable with who I was as a teenager and being confident as an individual. I had to take that and channel that into my professional life, where I built my confidence with what I could do and somehow figured out that, okay, well, I'm not going to be as amazing as Steve Jobs, but that doesn't mean I should not try to achieve something of my own.
I think that's really, really great. And I liked what you shared about just thinking about when to start and when you're ready. And one thing that I just want to underscore is that only you know when that timing is right. And so you're talking about being 30, which I think is really young. For some folks that maybe that feels a little bit late. But one thing that I do want to highlight is that you came into the world of entrepreneurship with some incredible experience from the corporate environment, working in Apple, seeing how a company that did start out as a small business in a garage, Steve Jobs' garage, and then became this huge thing. That was a path that you were on the inside. You saw how that worked, and you were able to say, you know what, I like these things about this company and all of these other things because it's big, it's huge. We can leave those behind and create something really powerful. So no matter where you're at, you could be 12 with a landscaping business. That was totally my story. And then I kind of lost that younger self and went into the working world for a while before I came back out as an entrepreneur, or you could be 57 with a great idea. It doesn't matter, age is not really relevant. It's just knowing in your heart when you're ready. And so kind of on the same thread of just thinking about your LGBT identity, I was hoping that you could take us back to a time, maybe in your business and starting it up, or even at Apple, where it was really hard for you to be out. And this is like a particular moment. And the reason why I'm asking you about this is because we have a number of listeners thinking about getting started. And one of the big fears, in addition to just the fears of being a small business owner, is thinking about how to leverage being LGBT, even the idea of being out. That might be scary for some people, or if they should be out. So is there a challenging moment that comes to mind? And hopefully there is. If you could share that, and then maybe share, one or two ways that you were able to work around that, that could definitely be helpful for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is, as you know, I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah, which I think most people know is a fairly conservative city and state. And so to start Odd Job there, I made that decision because I wanted my company to go into a secondary market first. I happened to be there. I had a good network there. I had a lot of relationships. And so the business itself, the business development side was easy because, the people that I pitched or that I was working with or trying to get on board as clients knew me. But when it came time to start looking to raise money for a seed round, I wanted to go local first because, the likelihood that someone would want to invest in a company that benefits the local community and that has roots in Salt Lake City is definitely more likely than someone outside of the state. But the thing about Salt Lake City, with it being so conservative, is a lot of the organizations, they tend to be old white men with a fairly particular religious background that is not necessarily the most friendly towards the gay community, or maybe not always supportive. And so it very quickly became a question of what I was going to do, because when I started, my fiance, he works for an amazing marketing and branding agency, and he is brilliant when it comes to marketing strategy. And he was very, very involved early on, helping me come up with the strategy, to the point where in the pitch deck he was listed on there, with his skill set. And one of the most important things to people who want to contribute money is the relationship with the people on your team and how long you've known them. And I had this moment where I wondered, am I going to describe Braden, my fiance, am I going to describe him as my partner? Because that's a very ambiguous term, and that they will assume that's business partner. They're not going to think like, my life partner, the man I'm going to get married to. They will probably just think it's my business partner, and then I don't have to address that. And I struggled with that question a lot. And because it left it ambiguous. And eventually I decided that it wasn't authentic. Like I didn't want to ask for money from someone who I'm going to enter into a long-term relationship, a professional relationship with, without being like 100% straightforward about who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because part of what I'm doing is because I want to create a great life and awesome opportunities for me and my fiance and our future family. So I would lead into it with, I am the founder. Braden, my fiance, is helping. He's in charge of marketing and strategy and da 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 da. And I definitely got some wide eyes and had people ask me to repeat myself, and it was hard. And obviously, there's only ever going to be one company that decides to give you a seed round. So a lot of the companies decided not to go the route of investing with me. And I won't know if it's because the idea was too risky or it wasn't the right time or whether it had anything to do with my sexual orientation. But what I do know is that when I met with a company who ended up investing with me, not only were they convinced that my idea was good, they saw my background and my sexual orientation and my partner as a value add. They thought it was great. Not only are they like LGBTQ friendly, they're active supporters of the community at Pride events and in their hiring. And so I think that it is incredibly important to be authentic in who you are, because you don't want to end up with someone who is invested in you but doesn't know you. And you may end up in a smaller pool of potential investors if you're going to be out. But when you talk to the right person, they're going to be more invested in you because of who you are, not less invested in you. And that's the relationship that you want to build. And those are the kind of people who are going to say, yes, I'm willing to give millions of dollars to your company so that you can be successful and so that you can realize your idea. And we want to be a part of that because we believe in you and your idea.
You hit it on the head too. You said you only need one investor in the seed round, right? And by a couple of things that I picked up on was, one, the location where you live, recognizing the people who have a lot of resources and power, as you described them, are old white men with a strong religious background. And I think in terms of perception, many of us come from communities of faith, some more accepting than others. And unfortunately, some of the louder and smaller factions of different faiths are pretty out about not being super inclusive of LGBT people, though that is changing. So, being in Salt Lake City, you were really challenged with, how out am I? And I think you made a bold move by saying, you know what, I am going to be 100% out. I'm going to talk about my fiance and who is my partner, but potentially like also involved in the business, and being clear on what that means. And I think sometimes we get in situations where we do talk about our partners, and for people not super familiar with LGBT communities, it's like, oh, you're a business partner. And I really respect you for just saying, this is who I am, and potentially losing some of those funders that would have otherwise backed your idea, and being committed to saying, I want one funder who is going to value all that I bring to the table. And you're right. The more that you can talk about your family, the more that you can be yourself, the more people really respect you for being authentic and honest. And I think that's hard sometimes, because when we aren't feeling safe, we don't disclose a lot. And I think the perception, even though this isn't true, is when we don't talk about ourselves, and some of us are more inclined to be private than others, the perception is that, oh, that Rhodes isn't totally honest with us. He didn't share his gender history until like 3 years after we knew him, and that's not necessarily the case. It's just feeling safe, and and you're in an environment where it doesn't necessarily feel safe, and yet you're putting it out there, and you are building a thriving business. So I tip my hat to you. And I also, this show is all about empowerment. And, you've given a good example of, when you can be yourself authentically, the benefits that you're able to reap in your business. And on that note, I know that we have many gifts as LGBT communities because of our experiences. And I'm curious, from your perspective, Ryan, what are some of those gifts that we have as being LGBT that fit so naturally in being a successful business owner?
It definitely changes from generation to generation. I mean, I think that I have one of my mom's cousins who was in his, late teens and early 20s in the 80s at the height of the AIDS crisis. I was in my early teens and 20s in the early 2000s. And so, I look back and I mean, we've gone from a place where there is no opportunity for you to be out or be who you are or connect with people who are part of your community to now, I have a 16-year-old sister who knows friends who came out at like 13 years old and are completely embraced. And so, it's hard to like narrow that down because now we have this huge change and shift in our culture. But I think one thing that we do share is early on, we have to learn about ourselves and we have to be very introspective about what the feelings that we're having mean and how does that affect my life and my decisions, and do I want to put this out there and be vulnerable to the people that I care most about, and am I going to be rejected or am I going to be embraced? And we're definitely in a time where there's a lot more acceptance, but you still hear so many stories of people who have an awful experience of rejection. But because we've all had to really, I mean, what my mom would say, the advice she always gave me was be true to yourself. And, more so than I think a lot of other cultures, we have to be true to ourselves and be willing to put that true self out there. And so by doing that, we put ourselves in a position where we are able to take risks, maybe because maybe starting a business doesn't feel as risky as coming out to your family at 16, 17, 18 years old or whatever age you might have been. We've had to be okay with the fact that we might lose relationships. We've had to deal with the fact that we don't know what it might mean to come out to family members or in a workplace. I've been out since I was 16 and I'm still, just like I was talking about earlier, where I had to come out to investors. Like that was me coming out again because, you're meeting them for the first time. So I think inherently we have to take more risk and we have to be more vulnerable. And that can be very hard, but it puts us in a position where we're familiar with a lot of those feelings and we can sort of self-soothe and encourage ourselves. And that's all internal. And more than that, because we've gone through those experiences, we also have people who are really, really invested in us. The people who have gone through our growth processes are going to care about us and are going to want success for us. And hopefully people out there have a great support system that they can rely on when they maybe aren't able to convince themselves of the potential that they have.
I love everything that you just shared, and it reminded me of a famous quote that is, one can have no smaller or greater mastery than the mastery of oneself. And that was the great Leonardo da Vinci who said that. And I think what you're describing in the coming out process around our identity, that requires a high level of self-actualization. Like you said, grappling with feelings when, as adolescents, our brains are not fully formed, right? And so we're figuring out in that development process of becoming independent of our families, figuring out who we are in the world, we learn this about ourselves. And it's a moment of separating ourselves from how we've been conditioned. And I think carrying that forward, like you said, into the business world, even stepping away like you did, you were in a great place. You were working for Apple and you had the itch, you had the butt, you were like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. And it's a way of kind of reinventing yourself and coming out again. And I think that skill, because we're LGBT, because we have to come out again and again, it's not a static process. I think drawing on that experience, whatever that looks like for listeners who are shaking their heads probably right now, leaning on that to say, hey, that was a challenging moment to step out and being not sure of the perceptions of how people will receive what I'm about to share. And nothing can be as challenging as that, I think, for some people. For other people, like you said, in the moment that we're in certain areas of this country and perhaps the world where they're a little more embracing, that process might be easier, but we still have a long way to go. But but it definitely, I a lot of what you're saying resonates with me in my own journey. So I want to thank you for that. And I also want to say to our listeners, we are going to take a very short sponsorship break, but please don't go anywhere, because when we return, we're going to have the chance to learn a little bit more about Ryan and his businesses.
HR and diversity professionals, are you struggling with engaging LGBTQ talent? Do you stay awake at night worrying about limiting litigation risks? Have you considered seeking support around these concerns, but just aren't sure where to turn? Look no further. Rhodes Perry Consulting offers you solutions with the Engaging LGBTQ Talent A to Z certification. This proven 4-week mentorship program delivers skills, offers support, and connects you with other professionals committed to transforming themselves and their workplaces. Learn more about this cutting-edge program by visiting rhodesperry.com and use the promo code RPC for a 10% discount. Take action and visit rhodesperry.com.
Welcome back, Outbosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Ryan a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way to stay in touch with Ryan after today's conversation. So Ryan, are you ready for the quick fire questions?
I'm ready.
Great. Okay. So in one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
Don't hide who you are.
Amen. That is great. That is a great response. Don't hide yourself. Be out, be proud, and obviously do so if you feel safe, right? And surround yourself with people who appreciate who you are. So what's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I have to use a calendar and I have to use a task list. Otherwise, I just get way too lost in my ADD.
Yep. And so the calendar that you use is what?
I just use standard Apple's calendar, and I use a to-do app called Todoist that has great reminders and tags and things like that. But yeah, and also I have an Apple Watch that has my calendar right on the face, so that every time I look at the time, I know what's coming up next, so I don't forget things.
Yeah, you can never forget when the calendar reminders start popping up. You're like, oh my gosh, there's that podcast with Rhodes. So
I know I'm naturally really unorganized, so like that's actually been my biggest struggle, is like forcing myself to become organized and not just be on the fly all the time.
So name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
That's a great question. I want to have like a really short answer to it, but this is something that I've been working through for the last 2 months, because I haven't been able to do everything. So I'm trying to find the things that I can essentially outsource. And, I would say scheduling can be outsourced. Follow-up calls and emails can be outsourced. And yeah, a lot. It's hard because I want to have my hands in everything. So I'm still like working on a personal level to release some of this to other people, because I like having it all, wearing all the hats. But I think, at least those two things can be time consuming. And so, yeah, I'll keep working on it for a few months, and then I'll call you back and let you know like what I've figured out I can let go of.
Yeah, well, maybe you can add that to oddjob.com, right? And just kind of like, if you have that platform mastered, because, the scheduling piece, there's the Acuity and the Calendly and lots of great software like that. I'm curious, you had said the follow-up calls that are outsourced. Do you use a virtual assistant, or do you actually have software that does that for you?
we actually are building out the software to automate a lot of what we're doing. Some of it's going to be bot related for email, at least. And we have a couple other chat integrations that we use. But right now, because we've been so focused on being bootstrappy, and because to me, it's very important to have a really strong understanding of the sort of customer journey that we have. I'm doing it all with actual people who can give us feedback and tell us what they're hearing from customers. And, there's a lot that we'll be able to automate in the future, but that's super dependent on the data that we have when we start automating. And that data all comes from actual interactions with people. So we're focusing a lot on having team members who can take calls and requests and really interact with our clients in a concierge-like way, like a very personal way. So right now it's person to person, and when I say outsource, I mean there's a guy that sits in the room next to me who is way more efficient with time, but just as friendly most of the time. And so him and I work together on getting in contact with people and ensuring things are done, and saying, okay, well the client asked this, or they were curious about this, or they wanted to know more about this area, so that when we do go to a more automated process, we can account for a lot of the variables that we may not know if we weren't doing this on our own right now.
I love that, and I can't wait for that process to be automated. I will be calling you. So Ryan, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take the first entrepreneurial leap?
You can do more than you think you can. That's the one thing that I've learned. I've met so many people that are inspiring and that I look up to and who I want to be like. And I've met some people who are incredibly successful who I don't understand always how they're successful. So you don't have to be Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. You just have to be willing to work your ass off and let other people see your passion and your commitment to what you believe in. And an opportunity will come up, and it may not be the opportunity that you expect or predict or want. But if you're out there working and taking a risk, people are going to see that, they're going to respect it, and an opportunity is going to come your way. And as part of the LGBTQ community, I think most of us are used to having surprises, and we can handle those surprises.
That is so true. That is so true, and great advice. So Ryan, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out my startup at oddjob.com. It's oddjobb.com. And you can email me at ryan@oddjob.com. And then you can see my consulting company is Lumos, Lumos, sc.com. And then ryan@lumossc. And so, one of my favorite things to do is meet people who are trying to start their company and talk through it with them and share advice and, see what I can do to help them in a network. So please, if you're out there trying to figure out what your next steps are, I'd love to have a conversation with you and give you as much advice as I can. So paying it forward.
I love it. So definitely take advantage of that. Folks that are listening, thinking about getting started, you've already got started. Ryan knows what he's doing. So reach out to him. Okay.
Sometimes.
Yes. Sometimes. All right. So outbosses, thank you for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Ryan. As a next step, check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation, subscribe to the podcast, and consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.